Welcome. This is Policy to Practice, a podcast by the Center for Development Policy and Practice.
Here we invite experts to break down complex concepts for easy understanding.
This is your guest for today.
So hello, welcome to CDTV's podcast. We named the podcast Policy to Practice. Today we are welcomed by Sonia Jorge, who is the most influential person of 2019 Top 100, and Ms. Kavitha Iyer from Article 14, who specializes in research in rural India and digital development. First question, you mentioned yesterday that we must ask ourselves, what is our role in this collective responsibility which is technology? So how can an ordinary person who's using his phone, what responsibility does he have? What role does he play? What is the bare minimum that he can do to?
Thank you for inviting me to speak on your podcast. First of all, let me just correct. I'm not one of the top 100 influential people on everything in the world, but on governance and technology. So that specific issue, just to clarify, because there's many other influential people that I have nothing to do with it. So in terms of collective responsibility, I think we all in our lives as people that are digital citizens, as we are talking about here in the Digital Citizens Summit, we all have a unique responsibility in our roles.
Right.
And sometimes our roles are policymakers, sometimes our role is working with communities and providing connectivity to them. Sometimes our roles are educators, what have you, producers, innovators, consumers.
Consumers also.
Either way, we have a responsibility to make sure that as users, as producers, as creators, we use technology responsibly. And we educate ourselves about not just the wonderful benefits of technology, and there are many, especially internet connectivity and things related to it, but also being aware of the things that as digital citizens, we need to be aware about safety, about privacy, about personal data protection. It's not just about taking, it's also about giving our time. So we have the right to use, the right to access to information, and the right to use technology however we see fit in our own unique personal lives. But we also have the duty of being conscious users. And that's really important. And those of us, there's many of us who for many different reasons don't have either the access or the ability to learn about those things. But you have the responsibility to teach everybody that you know how to do it right, as I do, as Kavitha will have. And that is a collective responsibility that I find very important, because I cannot just think of myself or even just my family. I need to think about my community, my extended family, my extended communities, and the people that I work for. If I'm not putting them at the center of how I think, then I'm not being a good professional. So that is my responsibility to that collective that I'm part of.
Kavitha, what about you? What do you feel about that?
About
About the role of a common man in this collective.
And a common woman.
Common woman.
Well, sure. I think that there have been a great many development in recent years that have benefited all classes and all communities of people because of technology. But I think responsibility is also to be shared by various groups of people in community, and therefore also not just civil society, journalists, but also policymakers, also government. And I think that there is a responsibility that all of them have also to improve data availability, access, and also digital literacy, which I think is one of the biggest problems. That's something that I would like to, as civil society, also participate in a little more and be able to see how we can educate one another better and be more responsible in the way we use the internet. At our level as journalists, what we can do is really see how to teach people how to sift fake from real news. Misinformation is going to be one of the biggest battles we're going to face going forward. So that's something that as journalists we can not only write about and report on, but also train others, and media literacy and training in just being able to say what's fact and what's fiction. That's something that
because everyone's trying to push their own narratives, and you don't know what's right and what's wrong on the internet.
I mean, I think one of the things that is interesting about the work that you do, Kavitha, and the work that we do and DEF does, and you also do in the research of the center, is that we focus on communities. We're not just kind of distanced and apart from communities.
Yeah.
We very much focusing on communities, and we don't pretend that we don't.
Yeah.
Like for me, if I'm not connected to the communities that we are working with, that you are reporting about, then we kind of just pretending, right?
Yeah.
I always tell people, look, if you're doing a report or a research or you're writing something about a community, the first thing you need to do is go visit them and talk to them and interact and, however you can, and not make assumptions, because if you don't have the direct connection, you can't understand. And digital life is about supporting people. It's not the other way around. It's not an imposition. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we need to make sure that we understand
Right.
how can communities benefit so that we can make it helpful to their lives.
Yeah.
It's not an imposition that they have to. They may choose not to,
Right.
and that's okay too.
Yeah.
That incidentally also brings me to another subject that we were just discussing earlier today, that some of us who are enjoying the internet may also want to think about speaking up for those who are having regular shutdowns
Right,
and
Exactly.
internet shutdowns, either for long periods of time or for repeated circles of shutdowns, and to be able to talk about whether these are effective as governance tools
Right.
by the government or by law enforcement agencies.
Right.
That's something again that citizens in general would want to really think about a little more.
Also, I think being on the internet itself is a risk at the moment. It's a threat, and you're faced with a lot of hate. So, how do you safeguard technology? It's a very layman's question, but what do you mean by safeguarding technology?
Well, it's about safeguarding humans, first of all.
Safeguarding
It's
humans.
not so much safeguarding the technology. The technology is already there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There are ways that we can make sure that the technology is available to us in a fair way, in a
Yeah.
just way.
Right.
But it's just as important to focus on humans, right? So that women and men, girls and boys, of wherever they are,
Right.
whichever locality, whichever group of the population, they are protected for the
Right.
reasons that we talked about earlier, about privacy, security, and all of that. But also to make sure that any kind of product and service that is dependent on technology access, that the technology is not abusing the fact that a human is interacting with it, right? So say, for example, as Kavitha was just talking about news, for example, distinguishing between fake and real, this is a really important thing, right? There has to be a way. I hope that we think of ourselves so bright as humans that we get to a solution where we can have proper ways of distinguishing, that we can teach people, that it's not just, we don't just leave it to people to do it. So safeguards are about rules, regulations, customs, habits that sometimes are actually defined by communities, right? And then they go up to laws and policies, sometimes the other way around. But with a goal of protecting us as users, right? As those that engage with technology. So I think that the one topic that I think is really important to showcase how these can happen is online gender-based violence.
Right.
Women are by far the ones most abused in online spaces and violated in many different ways. Women in certain marginalized populations in different cultures, right? And that is something that we cannot allow to happen, right?
Yeah.
Women shouldn't have to choose not to go on the internet, not to get abused. They should be able to use
Express
it in a way.
themselves. Yeah, on the internet.
And so there has to be safeguards, meaning regulations to address that and to penalize those who are creating these problems, the abusers, the violators, but also companies and individuals and all of us, again, the collective responsibility, taking the responsibility to point out when things are being done wrong, right? So that we can help and make sure that when women go online, they feel safe. And they know also how to be safe, how to be private, how to protect their information, right?
Yeah. So what I understand of it is safeguarding people on the internet is a part of our responsibility as someone on the internet and in the digital space.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely.
That's the least we can do.
That's the least we can do. I mean, I think here in India you have lots and lots of unfortunate events
Yes.
of these kinds of things that have
We're talking
happened.
about the Sully deals and
Different ones. I mean,
Yes.
there's different kinds of things. I mean, there's some communities that have been very much abused online in many ways
Yeah.
because the online world is really no different than the physical world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The difference to me, at least from my experience, is that
Right.
the kind of abuse and you know, almost torture sometimes,
Right.
it's faster to
Because you
spread.
have the privilege of anonymity in the online world. You have the privilege of not being shown who you are and giving your opinion, and which is scary.
It's bad no
Scary,
matter.
yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's bad no
Yeah.
matter. But I think in the online world is faster, is more, sometimes even more cruel
Yeah.
because of
Yeah,
that
because of
issue.
that aspect.
And I think in many communities it has become such a terrible. I mean, women politicians around the world, from
Yeah.
Europe to India, you know, everywhere. Women politicians are another major target
Yeah.
of these, and it's not fair.
Yeah.
It's unjust. So we need to have ways that we can educate in general
Mhm.
ourselves as humans, as digital citizens, because
Right.
being a digital citizen means that you also need to learn the rules
Yeah.
of act as a digital citizen.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that if you're not going to do that physically, the physical
Right.
space, right, in the analog space, then you also cannot do it in the
Right.
digital space.
Yeah.
The digital space should not be a cop out
Right.
or, you know, a kind of a way to mask,
Yeah.
you know, your evilness. We
Right.
should, if anything, we should be able to use the digital space to unmask that reality and uncover and frankly penalize those who are perpetrators of such behavior.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, women journalists too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another
women
major
journalists-
target.
women journalists have been a target. I was just mentioning some
Yeah.
deals, and
Yes,
all of us
exactly.
know how absolutely unacceptable that was.
Yes.
Exactly.
And those who were responsible for that were not all brought to book.
Yeah. And that's where we're not doing a responsibility. But coming back to the collective responsibility. Now,
Exactly.
Saurabh, I have a question for you. Talking about digital citizen, in today's world, being a citizen, it's a prerequisite. You need to have technology because the only way you can access so many rights is via technology. And talking about a country like India, where it's not accessible to a majority of people, what impact does it have on the rural community, especially?
All kinds of people are excluded and all kinds of exclusions are experienced. So very poor people would be excluded simply because they're either unable to afford it or that they're not able to afford it for everyone in the family, which would then typically mean that there's gender-based exclusion because the most likely thing would be that the woman in the household is excluded. She's the one who doesn't have a smartphone or the daughter doesn't have a smartphone. While the son does have a smartphone because he has to, because remote learning is underway or
Because
something.
of the sun bias in India, let's be honest.
Exactly. Also, another kind of exclusion is simply because some places are very, very remote and there is no connectivity. And some people, we saw photographs, if you remember, of children climbing on trees and standing on the top of a tree to study during the pandemic. Those are the kinds of exclusions that we do continue to face. And then the problem with technology not being perfectly available to everyone means that some people are facing exclusions from basic rights, which are basic entitlements like right to food.
Yeah.
So they're not getting their ration because they're not able to authenticate their Aadhaar, or they're not able to get work under Manrega because they're not able to authenticate their Aadhaar.
Yeah.
These are problems that are very, very serious and grave, and many millions of people are facing it, despite the fact that we believe that technology has solved a lot of our problems.
So, let's end with not being very harsh and ending on a good note. So, I would like to ask both of you, what is your favorite thing about the internet? Top of your mind.
So right now is that, you know, for my work, the work that I do, I travel around the world meeting people, and I'm always connected with my children, my 3 daughters, and my family.
And that can mean the world to you.
That means the world to me because I can be more present in a different way, and that is something that for a long time people didn't accept, you know, especially for mothers. But it's like, no, you can be a mother and anywhere, whenever.
And you're proving it.
Many of us. I'm not the only one. There's lots of women that are proving it, but I'm one of many.
Yes.
But yeah, that to me is really important. And with that, being myself, being a mother, being also a person that can help them think. So if a daughter of mine is doing some homework, And not only I can be connected to them, but they can ask me, you can send them a link, here, take a look at these, or let's get on, a call or WhatsApp or whatever, let's talk quickly. And I can tell, or many times I tell them stories and things that I've just experienced during the day. And then they write about it. And I'm like, wow, that was pretty nice. So, that is that connection, connecting people, connecting the world to me is really so rewarding and truly a pleasure. I mean, I can't imagine a world without being connected with all the people that I work with and that I want to learn more from. So it helps me become a much better person.
What about me? Digital news from across the world available at the tip of your thumbs. Never before the internet could we get this kind of immediate news from anywhere in the world and right in the palm of your hand. It's so close to you and so real and so riveting.
Yes.
That's about it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank
You're
you.
very
Thanks for
welcome.
having
I
us.
hope it works out and let us know.
Yep. Thank you.